After the mixed reception he's gotten as the new head of DC Studios, James Gunn has finally sat down to tell us all what his big plans are for the DCEU. So today, let us dive into this huge recent release of information as James Gunn presents his first chapter in the newly revamped DC Universe. Stay tuned. Hey guys, my name is DJ, and over the past few months, DC has been completely flipped on its head. And of course, that's all due to one man, the new head of DC Creative, James Gunn. While the DCEU as a whole has been a disjointed, confusing, and directionless mess since its inception, James Gunn has put together a plan to get the studio back on track. Recently, he released a video to his fans that provided us with a guideline of the next big projects coming from DC. So today, I decided to take a look at this video presentation and talk about every single major announcement coming from the Gunn's mouth. Now, I want to preface this by saying that we are seemingly getting more than what he announced in that video. He still seems to be working on a few more projects that he has close to his chest, so everything we have for now is just everything he wanted to reveal, not necessarily everything that we're going to be getting. After all, we know that DC over the past few years has decided to pump out movie after movie and show after show with everything seeming both connected and not connected at the same time, and it's kind of just been one big mess, and according to James Gunn, that is partially the reason why the DC universe has been so broken and fractured. For instance, the Matt Reeves Batman and the Joker movie are not canon. However, if you're just a regular average fan and you don't know the difference, it's gonna look even more confusing. Which is why in the beginning of the video, he said that he wanted to make things a little bit more clear as to what's actually canon to the DCEU and what's not. He even brought up the idea of having these Elseworld stories where there's a bunch of different universes going on around the main DC continuity. So if you're a fan of the Zack Snyder Justice League movie and you've been clamoring for another one, then it seems as though with this whole Elseworld idea, we could potentially see a Zack Snyder Justice League 2. I wouldn't hold your breath on that actually happening, but it seems possible, and it seems like James Gunn is definitely covering his tracks with this statement. But then we get to the weirder parts of this conversation, because he also mentioned the idea of cartoons and video games all being within the main DC continuity as well, and I got mixed opinions on that, to be honest. For me, having these live action characters be portrayed in animation, it's just a little odd. I don't really know how to properly explain it. It's like taking this whole concept and putting it into this other medium and expecting the audience to want to watch both things and have both things be important. And yes, I do understand that the MCU does have its own animation sector with shows like What If. But the reason why that show works so well is because it's not really connected to the main live action Marvel continuity. It's in this massive Marvel multiverse, and thus you can play with things like animation and not have it be directly tied to the MCU, even if it's just making references to those movies. I'm not saying that it can't work, but if you're gonna do that, then maybe you should just treat them separately. Maybe just have the cartoons be side stories for these main characters that don't really involve the main plot of the DCEU. But with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the actual big announcements James Gunn brought to this presentation, starting with the first cartoon and the first show on our list, Creature Commandos. And it does feel like a very James Gunn project, just a group of freaks and monsters banding together. So far, not a bad idea. I know James Gunn can do that pretty well. And just so you know, I'm gonna rattle through these pretty quickly because all we really have at this point are some names and some characters. So the next TV show on our list is Waller. And Waller is probably the least interesting thing he announced for me personally. Not to say that it can't work, but I don't think a lot of people really like Amanda Waller in these movies, and I just want to see them do something creative with this show. I'm sort of hoping for like a CSI mystery kind of show with a Peacemaker comedy thrown in as well. And following that, we get to the first film on our list with Superman Legacy set to release in 2025. If you saw my video about Henry Cavill leaving his role as Superman, you might remember me talking about how I think James Gunn's writing style, while excellent, might not fit well with Superman. Don't get me wrong, I love him as a writer and a director, but he works better with goofballs and freaks, and his style just doesn't scream Superman to me. But honestly, at this point, we've had so many bad Superman movies that, who knows, maybe James Gunn can pull it out of the bag. And the next TV show on our list is Lanterns. Fuck yes! A lot of DC fans, myself included, have wanted a live-action representation of Green Lantern for years, and if it does anywhere near good, as most of us have been imagining, then this should be a hell of a show. He also did mention that we're going to be getting both Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart in this show as Green Lantern, so I'd love to see their dynamic played out on screen. However, the next movie on our list is The Authority, and I'm gonna be honest, I've never really heard of this team before. However, I do trust James Gunn at this point, and if this is a passion project for him, as he stated in the video, then I can imagine that he has a pretty good idea of who these characters are and how he can bring them to live action. So I'm pretty curious as to what he's gonna be doing with this team. But now we jump back to television as we get to Wonder Woman's only real representation in this new DC slate with Paradise Lost. And for what we know about the show, it's essentially going to be about Themyscira. And I think that's pretty interesting because I think most fans at this point know who Wonder Woman is as a person, but we don't really know too much about Themyscira as an island and the whole culture surrounding that entire civilization. So I'm pretty interested to see what they do with Themyscira in this new revamp of the universe. But now we get to the second most interesting thing, in my opinion, with this whole lineup, and yes, Lantern is the most interesting thing, thank you for asking, with Batman, Brave, and the Bold. This film is seemingly going to be about Damian Wayne and his relationship with his father Bruce. And apparently it's also going to be the introduction of the Bat family into the DCU. However, if Damian Wayne is showing up, then that means that this version of Batman is pretty experienced at this point. Okay, he's probably been doing this for quite a long time, which in my opinion is a really smart move considering that Matt Reeves and his Batman movies are featuring a younger Bruce Wayne and a younger Batman who might not know entirely what he's doing. So it's going to be a pretty interesting contrast between the young Batman and this older, more experienced Batman in their two separate universes running on screen at the same time. Oh, and also James Gunn said that Damian Wayne is his favorite Robin, so he gets a thumbs up from me, because Damian Wayne is my favorite Robin as well. But next up, we get to a new TV show starring Booster Gold. I know a lot of people have been dying to see Booster Gold in a movie or show, so I'm interested to see if they can pull it off and succeed with all of this hype coming from the DC fanbase. But now we get to another rather interesting film announcement with Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. The story he described in his presentation is actually really fascinating to me. It tells a new origin of Supergirl where she was raised on a chunk of Krypton after the planet explodes, while Superman, on the other hand, is raised on Earth. And I really love the thought process behind this movie because what most fans are probably expecting when they think of Supergirl is kind of just the female version of Superman. However, this completely different origin for Supergirl could bring for a very interesting dynamic between her and her cousin. After all, Superman was raised by his loving family on Earth, while Supergirl had to watch her family die on Krypton and watch them all die around her as well on this big rock floating through space. So it's really interesting to think about what Supergirl and Superman will do in this universe and how their very different dynamic and very different relationship could end up spilling into maybe even a huge battle between the two. I don't know, maybe I'm jumping ahead at this point, but I really love the idea of these two characters having almost just entirely opposite chemistries, yet having the same powers and still looking to provide the same thing: hope for Earth. But lastly, as we talk about Earth, why don't we talk about a guy who's basically entirely made up of the Earth, as Swamp Thing is apparently also getting his own movie. Now, personally, I think Swamp Thing is rather interesting. Okay, I know he had a show a while back, and that received some pretty mixed reviews, but overall, I think Swamp Thing, the character, is kind of interesting, if not just for his powers and overall physique. I mean, the guy is made of plants, so you gotta think there's some pretty interesting stories you could tell in live action, or at least some very beautifully shot visual direction you could have with this plant-based monster. But yeah, that's it for this presentation provided to us by James Gunn. I can't help but think two things. One, that he has a very different approach when it comes to building a superhero universe, because he's brought in characters that, honestly, I don't think a lot of people expected. People like Booster Gold and Swamp Thing are getting more recognition than people like the Teen Titans, for example, which has been kind of the main problem with DC shows and movies for a while now. After all, we've seen Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman consistently for like 60 years and not much else. So the idea of him bringing in all of these nobodies, people like the Authority who I don't even know, I'm pretty excited to see what he does. He definitely has a very different approach when it comes to these movies and shows. And two, that James Gunn might actually be able to pull off a rather exciting universe. I said in my previous video about James Gunn that I do have a lot of faith in him when it comes to creating a very interesting cinematic universe. However, when I made that video just a little under a month ago, all I could say is that James Gunn had my attention. Now, he has some expectations to fill. Okay, you're promising Booster Gold, Damian Wayne, and the Green Lanterns, so you better make good on those promises. And James Gunn, I think you can do it. And after receiving all of this major information about these different movies and shows, I can say for the first time in a long time that I'm excited to see what happens next in the DC Cinematic Universe. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I want to hear from you. What do you think about James Gunn's new 8 to 10 year plan for the DC Cinematic Universe? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you wish he included something else as well? Let me know down in the comments. But of course, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. But until next time, have a good day. Bye-bye.